were to stop fighting today, there would be no Ukraine. If Russia were to stop fighting, there would be no war. So we need to put the pressure on the aggressor, send a clear message that time is not on the aggressor's side.
So I'm standing here with the Secretary General of the Estonian Foreign Ministry. Sir, could you tell us a little bit about your country? Of course, it's at the vanguard of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. You share a border with Russia. Could you tell us a little bit about how you're seeing the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine war, perhaps the possibility of peace between America and Russia to end the conflict in Ukraine?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We've described this war as being existential for us. And not because of the close proximity of the fighting. The fighting is not closer to Estonia than it is to Berlin, Germany. It is existential because at the end of this war, we will find out whether territorial integrity and sovereignty are still valid concepts of international life or empty phrases in outdated treaties. If we allow it to become the norm that a large state can change its smaller neighbor's borders with force, then no border in the world remains safe. And if we allow it to become the norm that the so-called great powers of the world can divide up continents between them again and decide what other countries can do and cannot do in their foreign policy or domestic politics, then I'm afraid we're reopening a Pandora's box we'd better leave closed. So we are absolutely focused on ensuring that this war ends. If Ukraine were to stop fighting today, there would be no Ukraine. If Russia were to stop fighting, there would be no war. So we need to put the pressure on the aggressor, send a clear message that time is not on the aggressor's side, and get to a peace that will be truly just and lasting. Our hope is that we'll be able to get there in this year. If not, then not, but we're working towards that goal.
How are you seeing the American role in this conflict? We've seen, of course, significant shock in some circles in Europe, especially about how Donald Trump has dealt with European allies in terms of ending the conflict. Do you believe that America has played a cooperative role so far? How do you think things could move going forward? Because there are questions about whether Europe will have to provide for its own security, its own defense, and provide really for Ukraine to fight this conflict if it wants to continue fighting Russia. How are you looking at that?
Well, the United States is obviously our biggest ally, and we're very strong transatlanticists in Estonia, so we're always hopeful that the United States stays on our side. But look, if the United States decides that it has to take a step back, then Europe needs to take a step forward. And this is what you've seen Europe do in the past few weeks. The messages coming out of European capitals are clear. We are ready to stand on our own 2 feet, to pay for our own defense, and to defend our own interests, if not around the world, and certainly in our immediate neighborhoods. European defense spending is going up, and Europe is ready to provide Ukraine with the necessary security guarantees that are necessary once this war is over. Winning the peace is not going to be any easier than winning the war for Ukraine is going to be. So Ukraine will require international support, and Europe is ready to provide it.
Could I ask you a question? Because many here in India, of course, have seen this conflict evolve over the last 3 years. And a significant argument that the Russians have made, that some in India seem to agree with, is that the expansion of NATO, and of course Estonia is a member of NATO, right up to the borders of Russia has been a geopolitical statement that Russia has not felt comfortable with. It feels like NATO and this defense alliance has been brought right up to its borders, and Russia, as a great power, has every right in some senses to say that, look, our interests should be respected. We have a sphere of influence, as it were, and NATO and the Americans have come right up to our border, and it's not so surprising, therefore, that we have pushed back. And there are many in India who actually back this argument. What would you say as a country that has bordered Russia and is a member of NATO about that argument?
Well, the root cause of this war is clear. It is Vladimir Putin's inability to accept the demise of the Soviet Union, which is something that he has talked about publicly at length. What Russia has wanted and remains Russia's goal, Russia has been open and transparent about. It is all of Ukraine, and it is a European security order turned upside down with a buffer zone carved out again on Russia's borders. This is 19th century thinking. Now, we would be that buffer zone. We're a small country bordering Russia. We joined NATO and the European Union to ensure that we remain independent, and we've succeeded at that. If this is seen as a threat, if our independence is seen as a threat, then so be it. We intend to defend ourselves and not go back to an era where simply the fact of living next to a bigger country meant that your sovereignty has to be limited. No, the root cause of this war is something else. We will either allow time to be turned back to an era where the great powers divided up continents and countries between themselves, or we go forward with the United Nations Charter, with territorial integrity and sovereignty at the corner of the international order. And we're not asking for countries around the world to help us Europeans in providing Ukraine with military assistance or sanctioning the aggressor. We are not asking for countries to defend European interests. We're asking for countries to defend their own interests. So for all those who are interested in territorial integrity and sovereignty remaining as cornerstones of international life, please stand up and say so. Your words matter. They're heard, they're important. If not, then we will be going back to an era that we don't want to go back to.
Again, let me tap into your experience as a diplomat. Again, as a country that borders Russia, there are questions about security guarantees for Ukraine. And of course, to end the war, people have also said that Russia has certain demands that it would like to be met when it comes to countries that are at its border. It's made certain demands regarding Ukraine and how many troops Ukraine should be allowed to have and so on and so forth. Do you think, standing on the border with Russia, that it is in fact possible to accommodate some of Russia's security interests? And also, is there a middle ground when it comes to dealing with Russia and the government of Vladimir Putin?
When it comes to the crime of aggression, there is no middle ground. Aggression has to stop. Russia has no interests outside of Russia that are legitimate. The concept of sovereignty means that countries get to choose their domestic politics policies as well as their foreign policies. Russia needs to go back to within its internationally recognized borders. That is the ultimate goal of our Russia policy. Nobody in Estonia or in Europe writ large has designs on Russia. Nobody wants to suggest to Russia how to conduct their own affairs, what sort of domestic or foreign policies they should pursue. All we're asking for is for Russia to go back to within its internationally recognized borders. That's not too much to be asked. Now, once this has achieved, and if indeed Russia wants to have a constructive relationship with Europe, then that path has to begin with rebuilding trust. One needs to realize that what Russia has been doing over the past few years is a systematic eradication of Ukrainianness as such, the destruction of civilian lives and properties, far from the front lines. The trust that there was is totally gone, and that needs to be rebuilt if we are to have a constructive relationship. If Russia is not interested in a constructive relationship with Europe, so be it. Europe can survive without Russia. Whether Russia can without Europe is up for the Russian people to decide.
We've been hearing a lot of conversation about Europe rearming itself, really spending billions and billions of euros on defense, acquiring new defense capabilities because of the challenge with Russia. There's also been some conversation about a country like India coming in and helping in particular instances. For example, Estonia. I've been to Estonia, of course. There was the Estonian Foreign Minister and Defense Minister mentioned that they're trying to get Indian defense companies to come to Estonia, manufacture armaments there. Could you tell us a little bit about that conversation?
Our defense spending has increased and will continue to increase in Estonia, in our neighboring countries, and all around Europe. I think you are seeing Europe wake up and realize that history is back on. For those who thought that the 1990s or the 2000s meant that history had ended, there have been several wake-up calls now. Estonia was never amongst those. We were always, as a border country, as a small country, aware of the fact that history never ends. So we are now taking our security more seriously in terms of defense spending, but also in terms of behaving like a geopolitical actor. Europe is one of the leading trading partners for much of the world. Europe is one of the leading, if not the leading, development assistance providers around the world. But Europe has been unable and in many cases also unwilling to present its own interests in geopolitical terms. So I think what you will see increasingly in the weeks and months to come is a Europe that is more self-confidently standing on its own 2 feet. We will obviously look for partnerships. India is an emerging power. This could very well be India's century. We're very keen on developing our ties, not only in the economic, but also in the security realm with India. A lot can be achieved. There's a major size discrepancy between Estonia and India. We're about 1,000 times smaller than India is population-wise. But there are some areas where that doesn't matter as much as in other areas. One of those areas is the high-tech sector, where India is obviously making a name for itself, and where Estonia has things to offer. So I'm very hopeful that, notwithstanding geopolitical turbulence, we will be able to expand on the already strong relations between Estonia and India, and between the European Union and India.
One final question. There's been a lot of conversation here in India about perhaps India trying to play some sort of mediatory role to end the Ukraine war. Is that something that Estonian countries like it would be interested to see?
Well, if there's a crime being committed, actively committed, and there is an aggressor and there is a victim, then the only help that is needed is for there to be more support for the victim and more pullback or pushback, if you will, on the aggressor. Other than that, I really can't see any help or being useful.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you.